So last minute, I got invited to go with the WAAAM crew to pick up a new airplane project and a rather display and possible ride plane for the museum. And now we're hanging out here at this private strip where there's, well, that was pretty cool. Jay, what are we doing?
Getting an airplane.
Hey folks, welcome to episode 8 of Low Lead. In this episode, I'm telling you a story about a road trip. So, as some of you may remember, back in October, I shared a video from the Hood River Fly-In, where we got to fly all these cool vintage Wacos. Well, that same weekend in California, at a private collection, they had a similar fly-in in vintage aircraft. And one of the really cool things that came out of that event was this YouTube video right here of them flying a 1918 Thomas Morse Scout with an original Lerone rotary engine. And after watching that video, I just became completely enamored with that whole airstrip collection, everything, and that aircraft. And I decided I wanted to go see it. And Mike and I started scheming ways that we could go check out that collection. And we still haven't found an excuse to fly down and check it out. But while we were scheming all that, it turns out that this ad popped up on Platinum Fighters about the beginning of April to let us all know that the Thomas Morse was up for sale. And as you can see at the very bottom there, it even says now that it's been sold. So unfortunately, I figured since I couldn't afford it and the museum doesn't usually spend that kind of money on airplanes, that airplane was going to be gone before I'd ever get a chance to see it. Meanwhile, the museum was actually making a deal to trade one of their aircraft for this airplane right here, a Cunningham Hall PT-6, the only flying airworthy example left in the world. There were only 3 built. This is the only one left. And I had helped package up the Lincoln page, get it ready to go down there, and it had left. And then one day I got a text from Jay that he was going out of town on an aircraft retrieval. And I knew that the switch hadn't been made yet or was in the works. And so I called Jay, worried that something had happened and the Cunningham was stuck in a field somewhere. And he said, no. The airplane's fine. The pilot's fine, but we're getting another aircraft. And I asked if I could go along, and he said yes. And we drove through the night.
Day 2 on the road. Jay, what are we up to?
Getting an airplane.
With the exception of a 4-hour rest stop so we could get some shut-eye, and this one short stop for breakfast at Nancy's Airport Cafe, which is a pretty cool stop if you have an excuse to go there. And eventually, the next morning, we arrived at the private airstrip that I had been scheming to go visit, and I did, in fact, get to see the Thomas Morse Scout, which is super cool in person. This airplane shows that it's been flown and loved and cared for its entire 106-year life, and it's just an incredible example. And then, of course, the Cunningham Hall, which is also just a very remarkable airplane and part of an just breathtaking collection of vintage aircraft.
So this is the airplane that we drove down here for. So we have to disassemble it. Well, first we have to unload the trailer, then we have to disassemble this, and then we are going to load this in the trailer, and it's going to get driven back up to Hood River, where it's going to start living in its new home.
That's right. We got the Thomas Morse Scout, and I cannot begin to tell you how excited I was about this. I immediately called work and said, I need someone to cover my shift tonight. I am driving to California to go load up airplanes. And then I drove to the museum, and obviously, as I've said before, we drove through pretty much the entire night.
So this standard J1 with the motor out of it currently is one of the aircraft types we're working on at the museum. Noteworthy thing that I didn't realize about the standard J1 is how huge this airplane is, because that is yeah, that's Jay. He's Jay, and that airplane just goes on and on and on and on, because I'm 6'1". I'm holding my camera at eye level, and that wing is just forever up there. It's such a big airplane. This is so cool. Having been around a bunch of standard J1 parts and getting to finally see one in the flesh assembled, it's an impressive machine. It's a lot of airplane. Also, that Waco's cool, and I actually don't know what that is, but I like it. Stearman, everyone loves Stearmans. And the Ryan STA back there, oh, so pretty. That thing is just, it's on my list. It's on the someday I'll fly an STA. Okay, this is one of the coolest cockpits I've ever sat in. So this is the Cunningham Hall PT6, and this is just all of these crazy geometric shapes. Single seat for the pilot, although there is a folding seat down here. You can just see right there, so you can pop that back up, and then you can have a co-pilot up here. The only problem is, for that co-pilot, there's no rudder pedals or stick, so there's no point. It's basically just, I guess it's like a jump seat for the airliners, right? Anyway, really cool, really Spartan cockpit, and very neat looking airplane.
So as you could probably tell at this point, I was basically like a kid in a candy store. I spent probably a couple of hours walking around just looking at all the incredible aircraft in this collection. And there's some really remarkable examples and unique historical pieces in this collection. So I was having an amazing time. Eventually I did have to put the camera down and get back to work and actually help with the disassembly of the Thomas More Scout, which was a big part of the reason I went on this trip in the first place. Now, another part of the reason that I went on this trip was also to document both the aircraft, but the process and everything else, as well as get some footage for this YouTube channel, even though that was kind of a, tertiary goal.
Okay, so other part of today is that airplane there is I think it's 1927 or 28 Lincoln Page. Might be 29. I don't actually remember. That is a Lincoln Page biplane, and that was part of the deal the museum made, is to get the two airplanes that we're acquiring, or at least one of the airplanes we acquired was a trade for this Lincoln Page. So we brought the Lincoln Page down with us last night, unloaded it. We're helping assemble it today, and then we've been loading up the Tommy Morse to bring home with us, and then the Cunningham Hall will fly back. So anyway, that's kind of what today has been all about.
And so that evening, once the Thomas Morse was loaded into the trailer, we spent a few hours starting the reassembly of the Lincoln Page. And then we went and got a hotel room and tried to catch up on some of that sleep we'd missed out on the night before, so that the following day we would be able to show up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and do a thorough inspection on the Cunningham Hall, make sure that airplane was ready for its trip north. And once everybody was happy with its condition, we pushed it outside, waited for the weather to clear up north so that it could make the trip home with hopefully no complication. And eventually, once most of the fun had been had, it was time to get back on the road. So, Cunningham fired up and departed. Thomas Morse left in the trailer, and about a week later, they arrived in Hood River.
That's good. I do love that it's just a back and forth rocker arm setup.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty cool as far as the complexity of the design goes.
More. And it's fuel, you can turn the fuel valve on. And
Fuel valve, yeah, it's on.
Okay. I don't think you've done that one yet. All right, I'm gonna get one more at the top because I think that's gonna put me at a good. I think that's compression-y. No, it's not. Hang on. There we go. Now I can feel. Okay. All right. Contact. Contact.